welcome to We Never Met, the podcast where I have interesting strangers on every week. Today we have Karen Pride. How you doing?
Hi, I'm great.
Yeah. What a day. What a day today.
Oh my gosh. People are dancing in the streets here in Portland and going nuts. Yeah.
So if you hear any honking, that's what it is. That's just so you know. So I guess, you've done, just looking you up, you've done so much stuff. You have such an eclectic background, such a cool background, and like what you're doing now is really awesome. So I guess we'll just start from the beginning. We're both from the Midwest, and you're out here in Portland now. So what was it like growing Michigan, right? You grew up in Michigan?
I'm from Michigan, yep. And I actually just got back in town from the Midwest yesterday afternoon. So
were you back in Michigan?
There. I flew into Detroit, spent a couple of days there, drove across Michigan. I'm from Southwest Michigan, and then a couple of days in Chicago. So
nice. Just for fun?
Spectrum. To see family. I hadn't in a while, and with the virus and whatnot, everything got pushed off, and then it felt like we just got to do this.
Yeah. How was it there? Because I'm from Wisconsin, and in Wisconsin, it's pretty bad with COVID right now.
It's really bad. It's really bad. I had been pushing it off and waiting for a better time, and then finally thought, okay, I'll do this now. And then it turned out to be the largest numbers that we've ever had. So I'm going to just, we'll just be careful. And, I'm just worried about my family because they're older, but I think we're okay.
Yeah. So going back there now compared to when you were growing up, how was it for you growing up there? Did you enjoy growing up in the Midwest in Michigan?
I did enjoy growing up there. I did. We had 20 some acres. Oh, wow. So I was a little out of town, and just had a lot of countryside, or land to play on. So I loved that. And I love being in nature now. And I'm sure that informed it. So I like the quiet and I like the nature a lot then. And I was totally scared of big cities because I had never been to them. And once I left and once I discovered cities, now it is harder for me to go back there because there's a lot that I've discovered I enjoy and, that want to be around.
No, yeah. I mean, driving an hour to get to any sort of large city is tough. Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you initially were growing up, you started out in the restaurant business at the age of 16, later on opened restaurants here out in Portland. So what drew you to the restaurant industry in general and the culinary field in general? What did you like about it?
Growing up, I kind of didn't realize what all the options were for me to do, I had a boyfriend in high school and I came very close to getting married when I was 19, and he was going to take over the family farm and we were going to have all these babies. So my family and people around me weren't no, go get here's all these things you could do your life. They were kind of great, and I know that they didn't discourage me from going to college, and I wanted to go. And I think all I really knew was that I didn't want to sit at a desk and have a desk job all the time.
Sure.
I didn't know what the options were, and I didn't even know what that meant exactly, but I love to cook. My mother, everything was homemade growing up, and I started baking when I was really young. Mm-hmm. And then I went to this program in high school at this vocational tech center for culinary arts, and I totally fell in love with it. I actually just met up with my high school instructor 2 days ago there, but I fell in love with it, and I realized, I could go to college for culinary arts. That's a thing. And it just kind of checked all those boxes. Something I love to do, not at a desk. Okay, great. Yeah. And that's how I started.
Yeah. What do you think you like so much about it, specifically cooking and baking and the culinary field? What pulled you there?
I think it was always changing. It's hands-on. It's artistic in its own way. Yeah. I feel like I do pot ceramics now, and it feels like there's such a similarity. Your hands are in there. And it's so many minute changes and adjustments to really dial in the flavors. And I loved that. Yeah. I just love that it was different every single day. We weren't making the exact same thing. There was so much to learn. There still is I still feel like a novice, with cooking in so many ways. There's tons of things I don't know how to do. So you can keep growing.
Yeah. And I was going to ask when you went to culinary school, did that make you want to do it more or less? Because sometimes people go into college or go into like a program that they're interested in, and then they were like, oh, I do not like this. Actually, this is not for me. So did it like encourage you to want to start your own restaurant and like keep pursuing, or were there sort of like, I guess, some things that came up that were like, oh, maybe this is not for me?
It made me want to do it more. I loved it. Like I loved the school. There was nothing that I didn't enjoy about it, except for maybe like the math classes or something. But, so it was a really good fit for me. And I thought about food all the time. When I wasn't in college, I was cooking. For years, it was like what I spent all of my free time doing. So it was just a really great fit. I enjoyed it. And then when I was in college for it, I discovered I had already liked pastries, but then there was a pastry chef, and I discovered that side. And that's what I loved more than anything. So I spent like all of my time over there. As much as possible. And I think I was pretty good at it. So they were pretty lenient with me and they let me do that. They were, fostering that part in me. And then I know the business side of it kicked in immediately too, because pretty quickly I kind of realized I'm a go big kind of person. So at first I was like, oh, I like baking. I'll do that. And then I realized like, well, no, I'll be a pastry chef. And then I thought, well, then why wouldn't I just have my own bake shop, or my own restaurant? So very quickly I realized like, oh yeah, I want my own spot, my own joint to do this.
Yeah. Is that what, so out of like all the places, I guess you could have chosen, and you have traveled extensively, why did you choose to come out to Portland to start like your restaurant here?
I wanted to get to the West Coast, and Portland happened because my boyfriend then at the time, his best friends loved Portland, Oregon. And I remember we had never heard of it. And we were just like, Oregon? Like, where is that? And what is going on there?
Yeah.
And they, are just like, believe us, like we love Portland. And, so they ended up moving out here. And then my story for how we really got here is that I was then, after I finished culinary school, I started studying a lot of Eastern philosophy. And I guess even when I was in culinary school, I grew up very strict religious Baptist. And then I started discovering Eastern philosophical ways and just was obsessed with it. And I think because of like my upbringing and trying to figure out, okay, what do I believe? Where am I? Right. So I was studying Eastern philosophy. I went on this trip to China and Tibet for 6 weeks and to study Eastern philosophy, and just like loved everything about it and did not want to leave. And when I came back to the Midwest, I had this horrible reverse culture shock where I felt like I just kind of shut down emotionally. And I felt like I was living in like a lot of rules and boxes, and like I felt very, very, very constrained, and I was. So I just changed my whole life. I was like, I'm out of here. I got to go. I'm going to move. And then I'd broken up with my boyfriend, but then we were still best friends, and we ended up, getting back together, and he was like, well, let's move out together. Like, I want to move too. And we decided we go to Portland because it was the one place on the West Coast where we knew 2 people and we didn't know anybody anywhere else. So it was a good starting point. So that's really how Portland came to be.
Like, speaking from talking to people in other countries, and I lived in Ireland briefly as well, is that like they have a similar depiction of the United States when they come here, is that like it's all like very boxed in and work oriented, and like it makes sense that that would happen, this reverse culture shot of coming back and having to, I guess, confront all this stuff here now.
Right. Yeah. It makes you realize that there are a lot of boxes that we're put in.
We have to categorize everything,
Exactly.
We love to do that.
And oftentimes even the roads, they'll be very windy and small and like fit around the landscape in other places. And here we're like, let's make some like, let's put one here.
Yeah, exactly. So then when you came to Portland, how quick were you like in starting your like dream of like opening a restaurant? Was it sort of like you worked at other places and then like, or did you just like literally jump right in and be like, let's just do this?
I worked in other places. One thing I knew was that most restaurants fail. and that what I wanted was risky and might not work. So I was determined to get my bachelor's degree just in case it didn't work. So I didn't know what else I would do, but then I felt like, okay, I'll have that base. If I need to go back to school for a master's or something, I kind of have this. And I just felt like I needed to do that for myself. So I also didn't have any money or know anybody here. Right. So I started working in restaurants as soon as I got here and just started studying Portland and, studying business on my own. And in school, I did a business minor, but I would read just every article I could find and ask the owners of the restaurants I worked at a million questions, trying to figure out, how do I do this? So it took some time. And then as soon as I finished my bachelor's at Portland State University, I said, okay, all right, it's go time. Like, I'm going to work this out. Yeah.
Was anything like very shocking to you when you started, like anything on like the business side of like trying to start a business here? Was it like really tough, or like were there challenges that you ran into?
I don't feel like particular to Portland. I mean, I had no experience, so business wise in that sense. So even to this day, honestly, like, I don't know. Sometimes I'll hear people complain about business, like different aspects of business ownership and small business in Portland. I still don't have, I haven't done it somewhere else. So I have a lot to learn there. Like, I don't know what it is state to state or what the differences are. I don't think I struggled that much in that sense. I mean, it was challenging for sure because there's tons to learn. Right. But I didn't have anything to compare it to. And I feel like people were pretty helpful to me, and I was able to work it out and figure it out. But yeah. It's one of those things that, like, I mean, you've created a ton of businesses, so it couldn't have been that terrible. The first one couldn't have been that bad. So with that, you opened one restaurant, and then you opened two other ones after that. And so what was it like, I guess, juggling all those restaurants? And also, like, when you decided to sell them, was that because of like a overload, basically, of like too much going on? It was too much.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I kept doing it and opening them. And I felt like I knew after the first one, after like a year and a half, I kind of figured it out. And life was pretty sweet. Like, I look back and I remember I didn't have an office in the cafe. It was really small. So I had to work from home, and I only had so much work to do. There was a summer where I went and spent like a couple hours laying in the park every day reading a book, and I had like, life was pretty chill. There was a few times I thought, what did I do? Like, I was making some money. I had never made like any money, I never made more than like 20 grand a year before that. So I wasn't making a lot, but it was great. Right. But things were kind of chill, and I had time, and I realized, okay, I need to do more. I think I'm that person that's forever has to be progressing and learning and growing and like pushing myself. And there's just, we have this one life, and I want to get as much out of it as I can, and like learn and do the most. Now I'm a little more like, okay, I want to do the most I can for other people in this life. But anyway, so then I ended up with 4 businesses. I bought a yoga studio too. And then it was a challenge to figure out how to do it. And I figured out how to run it with the help of other people and lots of managers and an assistant. And I feel like I was keeping up, but it caught up with me. All of that work eventually did. And I was overwhelmed and burnt out and so tired, and I was starting to experience the negative effects of working all the time.
I was gonna say, like, did you ever look back at when you started like the next two, and look back at like the first one and how like chill and like relaxed your life was? Like, why did I go this far?
Right. Oh, for sure. Yeah, I should have stopped at 2 restaurants and 1 yoga studio. The last one was a mistake. But I've also I'm a person who kind of has to learn the hard way oftentimes. So I just had to open another business to realize, okay.
Yeah. Do you think you like learning yoga and stuff was like sort of a response to all the stressors that were going on?
I think so. I got into yoga, like first I discovered Eastern philosophy. So that was kind of my gateway when I was in college at Portland State. And before I worked full time. I went to school full time. So I was overworked and stressed out as a college student, like pre-business. I mean, it probably set me up for like running multiple businesses because I wasn't that different. Just a little more broke, you know, at one point. But, so the way I got into yoga was the last 2 terms at Portland State. I had to take a couple of elective courses and I took a yoga class. And then I discovered yoga at the studio I eventually bought and fell in love with the physical practice. But I think the grounding practice and the physicality too, all of it, because I needed that. It helped stabilize me. And I never fully understood why I bought the yoga studio, because it was like not the best business move by any means, but it was one of those things where I just felt internally like I have to do this. I just do. But now I believe, you know, it's been beneficial in many ways to me, emotionally and mentally. But I think I had to make like going to yoga a job, right? Like I had to, then it became my job. It wasn't this elective thing that was frivolous, you know. I just had to do that. And I think I still do that with things, you know, like if I'm turning my ceramics into a business, probably so I can be like, oh, well, I must go do it, you know, now.
Yeah. Okay.
Because I'm not very good at like putting what I totally love maybe at the front and center.
No. Yeah. No, I completely understand that because I actually, I've done yoga before. I have an anxiety disorder and I remember like stepping out after I did it and I was like, wow, I feel so much better just from like doing it one time. It's a really great practice to get into, but I completely understand them making it sort of like a job. So you have to do it. You know, there's no options, you know, it's like maybe today I'll do ceramics. It's like, well, no, I have to, cause it's like my job. So, yeah. Do you find yourself now, like, though, now that you sold your restaurants, like, do you find yourself did you enjoy cooking still while you were running all those businesses, or did you even have time to do it?
I didn't have time.
Yeah.
I always enjoyed it. I never stopped enjoying it, but I ran out of time. And like most people, like it's nicer to cook for somebody. So at times when I, you know, was single, I wouldn't cook much unless I had enough time. And then I would love it. It's still relaxing to me when I have the time to grab the ingredients and put on music or a podcast and just have that time in the kitchen. So when I'm working less, I definitely cook more. And the enjoyment never went away. The like obsessive enjoyment went away, where before I used to, you know, that's what I raced home to do and every night. And I was like so excited to go to the grocery store all the time. And then it's a little more like, okay, I don't want to go to the grocery store now. I'm a little more like a normal person when it comes to cooking and food now, I think. Yeah.
You're not running down the aisles at the grocery store, like throwing things in the cart and stuff. But I wanted to ask, like, how did you sort of narrow down what you wanted to do for your restaurants? Because there are like so many directions you could go. Like, why did you choose the lane that you did?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I had met these vegan people that were vegan, had a vegan diet in Michigan, and in Southwest Michigan, there's not many people that do that.
Sure. Yeah.
And I had never heard of it. And they were these like cool artists in this town I was living in, Grand Haven, at the time. And I was just amazed by what they were doing. And I wanted to understand it because I didn't, you know, I was totally that person that was like, what? Like, what do you even eat? Why the hell would you do that?
Sure.
But I wanted to understand it. So I decided to try it. So I went vegan for a month, and it really just like, I had all these, like my body was processing that in many ways. And that was really fascinating to me. And I think that was my first step into like curiosities of the body and like what happens, you know, with what we feed ourselves, what happens inside, and then what we, you know, put out energetically and whatnot. So I met a couple other people in college that were vegetarian, vegan, and I ended up going vegetarian and mostly vegan for about 5 years. And I am not anymore, but I was so interested, and I was trying all these different, you know, cleanses and diet, like more like cleanses less than diets, but like different ways of eating, because out of curiosity. and learning about the body. And I love that. And, I started to learn like, oh, if I eat these types of things and I feel better. So, and I knew I wanted a restaurant, but kind of more important to me was doing good in the world and in the community and serving in some way, shape, or form. So I figured if I did a health food restaurant, then I could fulfill what I was looking for, in that fun side of making food and serving people and the connection. But I could give people something that was going to make them feel better in their daily life, right? Like they could come in for lunch and have a nice, healthy, filling bowl and like go back to their job or wherever and be satiated and like they're going to feel better. So that was really why I chose a health food restaurant. It kind of hit as many points as possible. Yeah,
I think people forget a lot, like how much like even your gut health is connected to your mental health, and like what you're eating is like you don't really. It's silly, but you don't really think about it as like fuel for your body and like your mind and stuff when you're consuming it. But you need to, because that's what it's doing. So, no, yeah, that's great. So with like the studies of like yoga and Eastern philosophy, I was interested in that because similarly growing up in the Midwest, it wasn't something that was ever really taught or like spoken about, like no one was really like, at least around Wisconsin for sure, where I was.
For sure.
So, when you initially got into that and were like interested in studying it more, what was the sort of reaction from people that you still were connected with, like back home? Was there any sort of like interesting reaction from like family or friends and stuff like that?
Yeah, it wasn't very accepted. Where I grew up, I was taught that yoga was witchcraft. I remember my mother saying that, right? We've since worked that one out, but it's not. And but so, just doing yoga, like would have been.
Yeah, that's wild.
And, it was challenging for my family, and I was definitely I wasn't being rebellious, but I think to them, I probably was, and I was confusing, and I had, left the church and left God's way and left, everything, all these things that they believed were right. And they had, thought they had like taught me, instilled in me, and like, that was good. Okay, we're going to go in this path. And then I went to college and was like, I'm not like, you guys, there's all these other paths. You didn't tell me about all the other paths. Right. Like I just started learning about all the other ones, and some of them spoke to me more. And I feel like they gave me lessons that helped me personally, integrate them into life and like be my best version, like through those lessons. So it was challenging.
Yeah, I bet.
It still is, in many ways. I think there's just a lot of confusion, and, sometimes my mother and I don't know how to communicate our thoughts on things. There's very few people. There's some like younger cousins in my family that I think, maybe follow me on Instagram and look up to me, and my niece and nephew. And I'm doing something that nobody else really in my family is doing. So it's very much like an outsider.
Yeah. You're a trailblazer in your family. It is very interesting because it's at those times, it's like, you're almost speaking like a different language, it's like, there's no way to like adequately communicate what I'm trying to say to you, because it's just like, we don't understand even where we're coming from. So that's interesting. So when you sold all the restaurants and then like kept the yoga studio and then went on to presumably what you wanted to do next, or what you like direction you wanted to go, how did you figure that out? And like, was there like a really big trial period of doing a lot of different things and being like, oh, like ceramics is sort of what I'm interested in. How'd you land on that?
I'm still really in the middle of that, figuring out what I want to do. I gave myself time. Sure. So I knew, because of selling the restaurants financially, I was okay for a little while and could take some time. And I knew I needed time. I hadn't given myself the gift of time. I'm still working on that one. But I needed that. So I wasn't sure what I would do. Like I thought that I've always loved photography. I studied it for a little bit in college as well. And I'd always thought like, oh, if I wasn't in the food realm, I would be a photographer. And I really thought I'd go in that direction, and then kind of realized, did a couple of shoots and realized, no, I don't like to sit here and edit for hours. Like I love to do it when I want to do it. Right. The ceramics I have turned into a business. But it's really still it's a hobby, business. I think it's really easy for me to turn things into businesses that I love to do.
Yeah.
And it's fun. Like it was fun to build my own have a friend build my own website recently and put myself out into the world separate from the restaurants and separate from the yoga studio, but just like as Karen Pride,
Yeah. Yeah.
And kind of like reclaim that my own personal identity as someone who's done these other things. So I'm still really in the middle of it. I have a lot of other ideas right now that I never thought I would land on. Like I got very interested in politics the last couple of years. I've been looking a lot into getting into politics and trying to figure out how that goes. But now that's even morphed a little more into maybe like some sort of humanitarian work or working for organizations. I want to be able to travel. Yeah. I just want to do as much good for, that I can in the world while still really enjoying it, like figuring that mix. So I'm
You're still in the midst of it.
Smack dab. Yeah.
Yeah.
Working this out.
Was it hard though? Like interesting, like hearing you talk about that. Was it difficult that you sort of establish yourself as a certain, like we talk about like people putting people in boxes, you sort of establish yourself out here as a restaurateur, like a chef and things like that. When you sold those, was there a lot of, I don't want to say backlash, but like confusion from people of like, or even it was hard for you because people put you in these boxes and you're like, no, I want to just do things. Like, yeah. Was that tough?
Yeah. I feel like it's more that other people put me in those boxes. Right. After I had Harlow was really popular, when it opened here and still is, but it became kind of like, the darling new health food restaurant. Like it was super popular and hip. And so I became the Harlow girl, and that would be strange, to go to parties and just to totally be interested. This is Karen. She owns Harlow. And like,
sure.
What? And I'd kind of be like, well, I like to do these other things
it's
too.
Not just this.
Yeah. So personally, I always really was like, wanted to keep other parts that were my identity. And I think, Instagram, social media was helpful in that way because I could put my photography out there. If I was in a writing mood, I could do that, or my ceramics. And if I was cooking food that was different than on the Harlow menu or whatever, my travels, like I would share that. So I'd say that it wasn't really too hard. I had a lot of people warn me, usually like older individuals. They were worried for me. They were worried that they'd say like, are you sure you want to sell the restaurants? Like they were afraid that I would lose my own identity, that I wouldn't know who I was. But I never had that worry, and I didn't really have that problem. I mean, I would say we probably all see, and anybody listening, somebody that really gets into something and they do make that their identity. And I think that we're multifaceted. There's all sorts of things that we do. And I think it's important to maintain the other parts of ourselves as well, if possible. Yeah. I always feel like, because I get this too a lot, I like to do a lot of different stuff, and it's always external forces that are interested in putting you in a category, because I think it helps them make sense of what you're doing in their mind, right? And so I always found that interesting. But I feel like people a lot of the times forget that we grow and age. Like there are other interests later on based on, just growing up and experiencing stuff. But people always try to, I feel like, contextualize other people. But that's really interesting. It's interesting that older people were worried for you specifically. Right. Yeah. And that's such a good point. I mean, I think, yes, other people usually are the ones that put us in boxes, and they're so confused when, I think very often people are very confused when I answer questions of like, what are you doing and what are you up to now? And sometimes I feel like I've had to spend a lot of my life sort of like advocating for myself and fighting for like, oh no, this is what I do. Or like, I'm going to live in a more like alternative way. And I don't know, the relationship I am is not like your normal mainstream way. Like you're always just having to say like, oh no, this is the way too. And this is just as beautiful. And like, good and fun and like, okay. And maybe you want to try something like it.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, no, I agree. Yeah. It's, people have so many different dimensions to them, you know, and it's always changing. So, I feel like that's what's really interesting. I feel like I should talk to the same people on this podcast like 10 years from now and like how they've changed and what has changed about them. Cause it's amazing how much people change. Yeah. So when you got into ceramics and things like that, as you're doing right now, was it a tough learning curve for you? Like, was it hard to get into it initially? Cause I mean, I've tried ceramics before and it's hard. It's not easy. So.
Oh, it's so hard. It's so hard. It really is. I started taking a class, you know, one night a week, probably like 6 years ago now, and I still at all the restaurants, and oh my gosh, I was so overwhelmed. It was a gift I was giving myself to go do. And my items, which I was excited as all get out about, were, you know, so wonky. And like, I was just happy that they like could hold things.
Yeah,
like,
for sure.
If it had,
if it looks sort of like vessel, container, bowl, you know, it was okay. Like that was my only goal mostly. And, I have some really weird shaped like mugs that really aren't very usable. I have a lot of pieces I got, like, you know, the next class I would get better and I'd be really excited about it and give them to people as gifts. And now I see them in like my friends' cupboards. I'm like, oh my gosh, the handle on this mug is like twice the size of the mug. It seems like it's for extra big hands.
Yeah. So it's hard. It's a huge learning curve. And there's still like, you know, I've managed to find some things that I can make that I've gotten pretty good at and consistent at. And there's still tons of stuff like, I don't know how to do. And it is really hard. So I have a lot of respect for ceramicists now. And also, a lot of times we'll see homemade work made by an artist, a ceramicist, to be like, oh my God, this bowl costs like $35, $40 or something. So much for one bowl, or this mug is $45. And I would think that. And now I finally realize like, oh yeah, that mug took like so many hours and so much patience and like years of perfecting, you know, your work to get there. And then like it spends all told like over like 2 days in the kiln and like you the glazing's another thing. Like there's a lot to learn. I think that's one thing I love about it though too, is you just keep on learning.
Yeah. I mean, there's like some quote from somebody about like just artists in general, when like things are priced high, it's like, you're not paying for the product right there. You're paying for the experience and like their knowledge of the craft, you know, basically. So, but yeah, I think, you know, it's one of those things that's like, it's a lot easier because you just see the final product a lot of the time with ceramics and you're like, oh yeah, I could do that. But it's like, no, you can't. The consistency is pretty amazing too. I feel like, to just start making, like ceramics that all look in a similar style. That's pretty incredible to me.
Yeah. That is one thing I'm just like now learning how to do. And it takes sitting down and it's helped me when people ask me for an order of something, or like I had somebody that wanted 10 little tiny bowls, you know, recently, and I've since made a bunch of them, but I like got 20 balls of clay and you just sit there and you just throw these little bowls over and over and over again. But that's really how to learn. It also reminds me that my ex-boyfriend would think like, oh, I could do that. That's so easy. You know, and one day I put him on the wheel. I was like, all right, here's a ball of clay, you know, do it. And you know, it takes like this 6'2" man who's, you know, oh, like I got this to then realize like, oh, I don't got this. Like, okay. Like, and I think to like maybe respect like my craft a little bit more then and realize, oh yeah, this is not an easy thing. She spent time, you know, learning how to do this. Yeah.
Right. As like clay's flying into the walls and stuff like that.
Completely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you see this big guy, like just like shaking, like trying to like keep this little ball of clay in place. Yeah.
Yeah. I've watched like people throw, like ceramics and stuff and like on the wheel, and when you look at it, it's so fast. Like, I feel like I would get so nervous about accidentally touching something that I shouldn't and making like a dent. But yeah, they make it look so smooth and natural, but I suppose that's why they're really good, you know, because they can do that. So do you have other business ideas and things like that you want to do in the future from now? Like, are you, other than the ceramics, are there other things that you want to like, that you're really interested in now or are like want to go for? You know,
I really thought that I would open another business probably pretty quickly ahead of a 3-year non-compete with the restaurants, just within a 3-mile radius. But I like the neighborhood, you know, where the restaurants were and where my home is, where I'm at right now is kind of in the middle of where the restaurants were.
Sure.
So at first I'm happy that I had that 3-year because I needed somebody to give me those boundaries because those parameters. Yeah. Cause I'm really good at, otherwise probably a year in, I'd be like, oh, I'm fine. Let's do it. Let's open this, you know?
Yeah. And 3.1 miles. Okay. Well, let's start here.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. So business wise, I think I'm not sure. Like now I'm all of a sudden totally not interested in having a business, and that's pretty new. I'm turning in the keys to my yoga studio on Wednesday. Oh. Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah, that is new, where the landlords have been amazing and they're just letting me out of the lease, and it just doesn't work, you know, during COVID. And I am also ready to dive into some new things and learn stuff and study other stuff. So I think like now knowing that I'm turning in the keys to this business, which is a new turn of events, since we first talked, but I'm really happy. I'm so excited and like elated to not have a business. I've had a business for the last, cause I had my food cart first. So 12 years, I think or 11 years. I don't know. Maybe more like 11 years. Like
sure.
I have had a business. So it feels really great to have that freedom and to just step back and really reevaluate. And so I just don't know. I don't know. I'm sure I will start things because I kind of almost like accidentally, I swear the last restaurant it was an accident. I didn't even mean to. I just kept being like, sure, I'll take that meeting. Like, yeah, I'll come check out the space. Okay, let's just meet the architect.
One thing led to another. Yeah.
And the next thing I know, I'm like, oh,
it's open.
Swear on here, but like, yeah, you're doing this. Okay. Yeah. All right. Oops.
Yeah. It's funny because like your experience is mostly like having businesses where now it's like sort of new territory, not having businesses, whereas most people's life are reversed, where most of their life, they're like, oh, well, I don't really have businesses. And then I do. So yeah. What have you sort of learned about yourself in this sort of, I mean, it is brand new, I guess now, but in this new territory of like not having that sort of like go-to business, like has there been things that you've learned about yourself just generally?
You know, I think I'm like really probably right in the middle of that like big learning thing. I'm learning a lot of things that I don't quite recognize yet. I started working with a therapist a couple months ago for the first time in my life. And that's really helpful. Like it's really great to have an outside perspective to, you know, for somebody to point out things. And she hasn't said anything business wise, but
sure,
I'm sure that there are things we will get to that are happening. My girlfriend, my partner moved in just at the beginning of September and she has 2 children. Oh, wow. 5 and 8.
That's a big change.
So I am in this huge transition. So I think I'm in the middle of learning like gigantic lessons and new ways of being. Yeah. And, you know, I don't think I have like the knowledge yet to be able to fully answer what I am learning. Yeah. Just like, I'm totally in the like, okay, moment by moment, day by day, like this moment now, like here I am. I just heard that mantra the other day, just instead of like be here now, but like here I am, you know, and let's see what happens here. And there's a lot of stuff that I am exploring and that I want to like spend some time researching, but yeah, maybe I'm just learning that I need to just show up and like give myself a little grace time wise to do that. I've always known what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. Always, like there was not a question. And I'm still pretty clear about like the type of path I want to go down, although I don't have the specifics, but to like be okay with having that not knowing, which I think is where probably most people more so exist, you know, that's my learning curve right now.
but yeah, it's interesting. I had a basketball coach on here once, and his mantra that he told people was be where your feet are, like be in the moment, like be here, be present, because often we find ourselves so worried about either what's going to happen in the future or what happened before we were right here in this moment. So, but that's the thing I wanted to bring up with you, because on your Instagram, you have like the lists that you made, at least for the past 2 years. Yeah. And one of them was about, if they're like more or less lists for people that are interested, you can go look at your Instagram as well to see them. But in 2019, you wrote pass in the less column. Is that something that you are still trying to work on? Because that's something that I definitely need to work on too.
Yeah, completely. So I started making these lists about 3 years ago. I saw it, before I would kind of have like an intention for the year. And I saw somebody share this where you say, like, instead of putting like specifics about what you want, it's like, I want more of this type of thing and I want less of this type of thing, past had to do with, I think, mostly like issues with my father and an ex-boyfriend I had who was an addict. I had a challenging, my father had a brain injury my entire life. He had that before I was born, and he passed away, it was 4 or 5 years ago now.
Okay.
But so he was a challenging creature to be around, and I never really knew him. He had a hard time, articulating what he needed to say. He had a hard time with, I think he often felt like overwhelmed and just didn't know how to like show up well and express what he needed to without like in a calm manner at all. Lots of things there. We could talk about that for a long time, but that was challenging. And that was a big thing. I think a lot of, some of my issues definitely like stemmed from unresolved things with my father. So, and I would kind of carry that, and I have really worked on that and have done some work to like let that go. And I didn't like hate my father. I understood his, like, what had happened with his brain injury and that caused a lot of things. But at the same time, it was hard to figure out like, okay, what things are okay and what things aren't, based upon the situation, right? Like let's have compassion, but where does the line? So I had some unresolved things with my father. And then the other big part of that was that I had been in a relationship with a man for a year who was an alcoholic, an addict of a number of other things, substances, drugs, probably sex, all sorts of things. And I think he probably had a lot of trauma in his past too, that led to some of that behavior. But I got into essentially an abusive relationship. He wasn't physically abusive, but I was being super manipulated, and I lost a big part of myself, like my sense of self, because I was so confused because I had been manipulated in there. And that really, like, I didn't even understand what anxiety was, before that. When people would talk about it, I hadn't experienced it. And I like started experiencing anxiety, not being able to sleep, like fear and jumpiness over certain things. And there's a lot from that relationship that still, is, with me, I think, and I'm still working through. So that was kind of a lot of it. And also thinking about the, leaving behind so much relationship stuff, right? We carry the heavy things with us. And, I love being connected to a lot of my exes, and I'm really good friends with many of them. And I love having them in my life, but I realized like, I need to like leave these parts that are not helping me behind. And I need to be here now. Like I need to have, I need to just like stay with where I am, where my feet are now, in this moment. So that was what that was about. Like, okay, let's let less of that in anymore.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's great. And it's also a really good tool that I never have seen before. If people want to do that, the more and less. Cause it does give you sort of more, I guess, bigger ideas and concepts to sort of work towards. We're almost at 2021. So there's almost time to make another one soon.
Totally. And I've been thinking about it, and I like so recommend this more or less list, and I keep it on my fridge, and I honestly do look at it. I see it almost every day. It's like right by the garbage can. So it's like going out the back door, but you just see it, and I will stop and read it at some point almost every week. And, it's so great because you're not boxed in then. You just say, I want more of this, you know, I want whatever, like more, I think, you know, mine had like more joy, less stress, I've had like lateness on there, you know, instead of like, I will never be late again. I just want to be late less than I was last year, you know, and some things stay on the list because I'm still working on them. But yeah, I've started thinking about like, okay, what's on my next year? Because I think it's really helped me be a better person.
Yeah. I feel like everyone needs some sort of like goals and like challenges to work towards to keep improving always. Cause I'm in a very similar, headspace where I always want to try to be better than I was before because what's the point of not, you know, like I don't want to be stagnant or be worse, you know, I want to try to be better. So, no, that's a great tip for sure. I think, I also saw there was some like phone stuff on there, like using your phone less cell phone time. That's something that, sometimes I just quit social media and stuff altogether because I just have to take a backseat. But how has that been going?
You know, ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
That one I'm sure will be on the list next year.
Yeah.
Too. I find that probably like most people, if I'm anxious or stressed about things, I spend more time on it. It's a distraction device. I've refreshed the map for the election hundreds and hundreds of times.
For sure.
The last few days, and it's obsessive, but it is really addicting. And I think, you know, we have to figure out how like these phones are in our lives and they can be helpful, but how do we continue to like, be better, see where we're at and where we need to be better. So that one, I'd say it depends. There are times where, I'll delete the app or try to really put it away for a little while. And I find that when I'm healthier, I'm more able to do that, but it also makes me healthier. So, it's a hard one.
Sometimes I just want to get like a flip phone again, you know, that has like, all I can do is call and text, and that's it. But yeah, it's always in the back of my mind. I'm like, maybe I'll get a flip phone again one day. But no, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for coming on here and chatting with me. So for people that are interested in connecting with you or like figuring out what you're up to, where can they find you at?
I'd say my Instagram, which is at Karen Pride, my name, and then also my website, which is karenpride.com.
Yeah.
Super simple. So there's an email from there. My email is hello@KarenPride. Those are the two places where I am and probably where I share a lot of just what's happening on the regular basis is on my Instagram page. And I don't do any of the other platforms. So
yeah, well, it's probably for the best.
Keep it narrowed down.
It's pretty awesome that you got Karen Pride on both those. 'Cause I feel like that might be a common name.
I don't know. I think Pride is not a common last name. So I feel like I got a little lucky. Like I probably got into the Instagram just in time. And I remember, a friend had me buy the domain Karen Pride like 4 years before I ever built the website. So I do feel like I'm like, all right, I got that one.
Yeah. Because my last name is so difficult that I can't even spell it. So, I can spell it. I should say most people can't. So yeah, you got a great name for that, for searchability. But thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. I think your work is really cool, and I really love your story is awesome, and what you're doing is cool. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. It's good to have a talk. I hope to meet you in person here too.
Yeah. Someday.
Yes, one of these days.
All right. Well, have a good one.